Even the grandest of lore theories can leave us wondering, is this building toward a larger point? Is this guy just rambling? And perhaps most salient of all, what exactly is the Grand Unified Theory? If you have asked yourself some, all, or none of these questions, then this video was custom made for you. This is Gut Check. As before, this video is intended as a follow-up to the Grand Unified Theory of Elden Ring, but you're welcome to start here with the punchline, and then work your way back to the beginning later. In my other videos, I make a series of connections that build up to a larger thesis, but since I spend so much time talking around the punchline, I can understand if you left the series still uncertain exactly what the Grand Unified Theory is. So here I'm going to give a few clarifications, and then get straight to the point, with the most concise version of it I can muster. First clarification. I believe that my interpretation can inform both our understanding of themes and literal lore. If it feels like I spend too much time thinking about allegory, keep in mind that Elden Ring has a clear and consistent pattern of taking metaphors and making them literal within its world. So identifying themes leads us directly to narrative connections. Second clarification. I use the words interpretation and lens frequently because the starting point of this theory is to identify what I think the story of Elden Ring is fundamentally about, the deepest, most centrally important themes, and then to look at the rest of the lore and see how it connects to this core. So then, what is the conceptual core of Elden Ring? For me, it's two ideas and how they interact. First is the relationship of unity and division. Specifically, division is the action that creates the mortal world and individuality within Elden Ring, while unification brings mortals closer to the divine. The One Great is the most unified and most divine state of the world, and as it divided countless times, it created the lands between as we see it. Meanwhile, as individuals unite and merge, they gradually become more divine. This is causality and regression, the two forces that are constantly interacting to create the world. The second core idea is the impossibility of perfect translation, and specifically, the impossibility of interpreting divine will. The game begins with you being given divine guidance in the form of the light of grace, and the further you follow that thread, the more layers of obscurity you find between yourself and the divine will you are supposedly serving. The long absence of the greater will from the lands between is a fact that only becomes more and more clear the deeper you delve into the game and its DLC. And this synergizes with the first core idea, because the distance between the divine and mortal perspectives is made clear by the path that leads between them, either dividing consciousness countless times to create individual perspectives, or, going the other way, merging individuals together and obliterating their individuality to attain the perspective of a god. These two genres of perspective, the mortal and divine, are categorically incompatible, and thus divine will must travel through countless layers of interpretation and translation as it winds its way down through light, falling stars, and semi-divine messengers to reach the mortal world. This is the lens I began with, and with that lens in mind, we can identify major thematic threads, which in turn lead us to understand the actual lore more clearly. One of the best examples of this is the Rebus thematic. Upon a first playthrough of Elden Ring, the reveal that Marika and Radagon are the same person might feel like a dramatic, but ultimately random bit of information. And yet the game clearly considers this one of the most important reveals in its story. If we consider the importance of unity and division, however, and the alchemical thematics in Elden Ring, the union of man and woman into a single higher being is an unmistakable image of a rebus. Within alchemy itself, this male-female unity is mostly symbolic of the idea of unifying opposing elements, but within Elden Ring, it could not be more literal, and helps us to identify that Marika's divinity is founded upon her being more than one person. This idea is expanded upon in the DLC, where we discover that shamans all have an uncommon ability to merge with the flesh of others, and were being used ritualistically by the Hornsent to merge individuals together. This is a recurring image, and we find numerous factions throughout the world of Elden Ring trying to imitate or approach divinity by unifying individuals together. So let's pull this thread and expand on some of the big picture connections. Firstly, twins. This division and unity core idea allows us to more explicitly answer the question I asked at the beginning of my duality episode. Why are there so many twins in Elden Ring? The answer is that if all of creation occurs through division, then twins are pieces of reality that are freshly severed, pieces that still fit together. They form a sort of bridge between the forces of causality and regression, because they are simultaneously individuals and parts of a unified whole when considered with their other half. This language comes up frequently in descriptions of twins within the game. For instance, Relana's twin blades, not to be confused with twin blades, says, Carrion light greatsword, embedded with blue glintstone, weapon of Renala, the Twin Moon Knight, 2 swords as a single armament. The description uses the singular form, and describes this as a single weapon, which is composed of 2 swords. In twin blades, not to be confused with twin blades, this relationship is even more clear, as the 2 blades are attached at the handle. Dee's weapon, the inseparable sword, goes even further. It is a sword made by compounding silver and gold, and says, the inseparable twins found solace in the Golden Order, the only institution not to revile them as accursed beings. Again, in the context of the Rebus thematic, the idea that the Golden Order values the unification of opposites makes sense. Meanwhile, other cultures might perceive twins as not fully separated individuals, and therefore cursed. Incidentally, there are historical, real-world cultures that also considered twins cursed, so, as usual, Elden Ring is building off of real-world ideas. Also note that twinhood can be layered. For example, Malenia and Miquella are twins, but Miquella also has his other half in the form of Saint Trina. The more divine a being is, the more times they can be divided to form separate perspectives. While twins naturally thread the needle between divided and unified identities, one can also create this balance through ritualistic union, aka marriage. This is why the game puts so much emphasis on consorts. Through a divine union, 2 individuals become more than the sum of their parts, able to transcend their individual perspectives and jointly invoke the forces of creation. Speaking of which, let's talk about divine language. My very first claim was that golden runes are part of a divine, world-making language. I then claimed that great runes could only be born by demigods, because they were each, in some sense, more than one person. Now that we have a fuller picture, let's look at that idea again. Firstly, I assume that it's pretty clear by now why I'm claiming that the demigods are each more than one person. But just to seal the deal, consider how often this imagery specifically comes up with them. Godric, the very first demigod most players encounter, has the most inelegant and brute force version of this thematic on display, in the form of grafting. He is desperately trying to elevate himself by attaching as many body parts to himself as possible. Rykard has not only merged himself with a snake, but has in turn consumed countless mortals who make up the combined Serpent King, and he invites you to join him as family. How nice. Malenia and Miquella are not only twins, but we see each of them divide into multiple people. Malenia creates her buds in the form of Millicent and her sisters, while Miquella also contains Saint Trina. We fight Morgott and Mohg twice each, because they can each create duplicates of themselves. Ranni, despite giving up her Empyrean flesh, is still visually depicted as having 2 faces and more than a typical number of arms. The specifics vary, but the theme is abundantly repeated. So consider this in the context of divine and mortal perspective. Unification of individuals gives you a more divine perspective by allowing you to see from multiple perspectives at once. If the world of Elden Ring is foundationally made up of a divine language, then a demigod or other divine being can see this divine language from multiple perspectives at once. They can perceive great runes and the Elden Ring itself in a way that mortals cannot, because we are limited by our individuality. To understand this, imagine trying to describe a 4-dimensional object, like a tesseract, to a 3-dimensional creature, like a human. We can try to understand a 4-dimensional object through analogy, through logical representation, or through symbolic rendering, but we can never truly see an object in 4 dimensions. Same thing would be true for a 2-dimensional creature trying to understand a 3-dimensional object. In essence, I am suggesting that the Elden Ring is akin to, or perhaps literally is, a higher dimensional object, and that the flat 2-dimensional image we see of it in-game is only a representation of it from the perspective of a mortal. Marika's eyes being closed can be understood to suggest that she is looking inward, and what is within her is the Elden Ring itself. This is the vision she is perceiving and then spreading to the world around her through the emanated light of the Erd Tree, a vision of a deathless world made manifest. There is, however, a great flaw in the Golden Order, and that is found in Marika herself, because she simultaneously has the perspective of a godlike being and the subjective perspective of a mortal. This fact has been glossed over by the churches and dogma of the Lands Between, but the game makes it more and more clear as we progress and explore. Marika is a person, and she is unable to fully let go of her own past, her trauma, her love. Her own fears are being woven into the fabric of the world, which is seen most clearly in the banishment of destined death, an essential part of reality that she simply refuses to look at. This is what makes Miquella such a strong foil for Marika, because he comes to understand all of this, and sees that the world can never truly heal while it is built upon the guilt and fear of a person. He aims to do things differently, and concludes that he must shed all of the things that make up his biased and individual perspective. I abandon here my doubt and vacillation. I abandon here all of my fears. I abandon here my love. These are the words Miquella leaves behind after he has abandoned his flesh and continues shedding parts of himself until the only thing left is divine, the unbiased, unfearing Godhead that can create a more perfect order. What Miquella and Marika both fail to understand is that a perfect and eternal order is less than the world can and should be. This deep longing for the divine and the perfect blinds the inhabitants of the Lands Between to the miraculous beauty of mortality. Transformation, change, death, and rebirth are the domain of the imperfect, and yet they hold a power just as great as the grace of gold. Perhaps the greatest power of all is the power individuals have to choose to care about something for no particular reason. This is what makes the stories of Dialos, Bach, and Roderica resonate with us so strongly. They each need to unlearn the importance of strength and forgive themselves for being compassionate. Elden Ring takes our most mythical tales about strength and godlike power and shows us how terrifying a world these forces actually make. It is in the face of the seemingly relentless struggle for power that we see most clearly how important quiet beauty and acceptance truly are. Even in the midst of the most flawed creation, there is room for us to invest ourselves into the world, rather than divest ourselves from it. To choose to embrace our mortal perspective and the quirks and flaws of our world. And I've chosen to embrace my own quirky, personal perspective on Elden Ring itself, and to see just how much meaning I can find within it. Because that sure sounds better than losing myself in the search for an objective or divine perspective. The last point I want to make about the Grand Unified Theory is that it was never meant to be the end of the discussion on Elden Ring's lore. I consider the theory complete in the sense that I have fully outlined the interpretive lens I'm using, and demonstrated just how many elements of the game connect elegantly together when viewed through this lens. I have not, however, exhausted all of the topics that could be analyzed through this lens, and I encourage you to take from the gut whatever concepts are most useful to you in your own understanding of the lore. I made this series to enrich our ability to engage with an enigmatic story, after all, and I believe that Elden Ring is a game about perspective, and how different people can look upon the same thing and see it differently. So, I'm not going to insist that my interpretation is the only valid reading of the story of Elden Ring. I do think it's a very good one, though. I always assumed that these ideas would gradually enter the discourse around the game and mingle with other theories. Over the last year, I have gotten to see a handful of videos that do build upon themes I've raised, and particularly wanted to give a nod to Consecrated Lorefield. They've mentioned, for example, an idea that connects to one I raised just a minute ago, that there's a parallel between Miquella shedding his doubt and vacillation, and the greater will breaking apart the One Great and separating out the frenzied flame, now a separate entity that carries the doubt and vacillation that lingers from the creation of all things. It's quite an elegant parallel, and their debut video is definitely worth a watch. I also appreciated getting to see the live reaction of Last Protagonist to my videos, even though I'm sure he doesn't agree with me about everything, and watching someone watch my video was a surreal experience. It's still extremely valuable to see someone's live thought process while engaging with my own theories. And more recently, I've been engaged in a variety of conversations on Discord that are giving me ongoing inspiration for new videos. So I want to thank everyone who has participated either there or in the comments. Some of you have written me whole master's theses, and I, for one, always welcome new ideas and appreciate seeing how much we're capable of inspiring in each other. In addition to the Grand Unified Theory, I also have videos on side topics within Elden Ring's lore, called Between Meanings, and I will soon add to that collection with an Ancient Dragons episode. I have also broadened this channel to talk about other games that benefit from a philosophical lens. So, for example, if you just heard about how Clair Obscur swept the Game Awards, then now is as good a time as any to try it out and watch my act-by-act analysis along the way. I intend to talk about a variety of games and stories, but will regularly return to Elden Ring, as there are endless topics to analyze within it. I want to thank everyone who has engaged with and supported this channel, especially when it was just getting off the ground. A year ago, I wasn't sure how much time I could afford to spend on making video essays, and I quite like being in the future where I completed the Grand Unified Theory and then continued making content afterward. If you also like being in this future, you can support the channel on Patreon, and it always helps to like, comment, share, and to name drop me in your own masterpiece. Thank you for watching, and make sure to grab the algorithm by the shoulders, stare into its eyes, and tell it that this is some engaging content. Until next time.